Welcome to the United States of America podcast. I am your host, Niti, and we are broadcasting live from the Food Church here in North Carolina. If you missed past episodes, please be sure to take the time to watch the first episode and watch the rest like a documentary. We are a people at peace, and we have declared peace to all nations around the world. This is not a marketing or a promotional channel, and we are shining a light on knowledge that is being hidden from you. We are sharing the truth about your birthright and your inheritance. We have moderators who are assisting in the comment section. Be kind and self-govern. If you have any questions, please put them in all caps and only enter them once per show. I am joined on air with a few of the North Carolina Assembly coordinators. Greg Clarkson is tied up with harvesting this week and next week, so he'll be back in a couple of weeks. And now I am proud to introduce you to Justice Anna Maria, who is joining us live from Alaska today. Welcome, Anna. Hey, everybody. How's everybody doing today?
Great.
Glad to be here.
Welcome, Becky.
Thank you. Hi, Anna.
So we have 4 out of the 8.
Oh, we're supposed to have 4 more people, huh?
Yeah, I didn't think we could fit everybody, and we thought this might make for a little bit of a better conversation. So we're going to do 4. And, you know, Anna, look, we on North Carolina wanted to thank you and the Federation for jumping in and helping us during this state of emergency. And today I wanted you to help people everywhere comprehend what it looks like when the Federation steps in, because unfortunately, no one seems to know. These people are still expecting the corporatocracy to come and save them because they haven't differentiated who the players are here. They think that, you know, help looks like Blackhawks and military guys swooping in to save the day. And it looks like someone just giving them big checks to fix all their problems. And I don't know, Anna, like I lived through Hurricane Hugo, and the only ones who saved us was not even insurance companies or anybody. It was just us. I don't remember, you know, we didn't get big checks or anything. And listen, for me and this group of coordinators, we are just thankful that you invoked the law of the land here on North Carolina. That was one of the biggest moves that could have been made in our favor. And there's a great misunderstanding about what the work of the Federation actually is and what the responsibilities even of the Assembly actually is. And so I hope that you could please speak to us about what is really happening, because, you know, from what we can comprehend, our mission is, you know, is basically just to protect the people and their assets. I mean, this is what we think the Assembly mission is. So maybe you could help us. I mean, correct us, teach us.
Well, the mission of government at all levels is to protect the people and the assets. There is no other valid role for government to play. It's the only reason we have government, right? So whether at the level of the county or the state or the country as a whole, that is the role of government. It's the only proper role of government. However, our federal subcontractors have taken it upon themselves to assume many other duties and rights, and have been playing many different roles that they're really not authorized to do or play. And so one of the things that came into conflict early on was a conflict between the Federal Emergency Management Administration. Excuse me, I'm suffering an early morning voice problem here, but it was a conflict between the Federal Emergency Management Administration and local civilian efforts to provide relief to their neighbors. And so they were confiscating trucks and van loads of supplies that were being taken to, staging areas that were close to the disaster area, and they were confiscating all this civilian generated supply and recoupment effort. So we had to step in and we had to put FEMA in its place. And so declaring law of the land is one way to do that, and we did that. Subsequent to that, they tried to apply under North Carolina law to, give themselves a position over and superior to the local civilian effort. And they actually went so far as to arrest several of our helicopter pilots and try to obstruct our ongoing activity. And so they were in court, and we basically slam dunked them. And so our guys were released very promptly, and we're back on the job, but it did cause a delay of some hours for some of the pilots. And during those hours, lives may have been endangered or lost because they were not able to access their staging area. Anyway, FEMA has been a big pain in the butt. It has done nothing, which it has done at many other occasions. I survived a national level wildfire event and lost my house in that. So I am very familiar with just exactly how incompetent and useless FEMA is. In our case, they showed up 3 weeks after the fire and walked around with clipboards and essentially acted as insurance agents that were there to try to define and limit claims against the federal government. So they were absolutely useless and provided no aid whatsoever. No practical aid whatsoever was received from FEMA. They did not actually do anything toward restoring. They did not do anything toward helping with the cleanup, and they did not do anything in terms of donating any goods or services to the rebuilding effort. So you're left scratching your head and going, well, what the heck is this agency for? Well, it's basically they are insurance agents whose job it is to limit claims against the federal government for malfeasance and other issues. So they go around and they try to define and limit what your claim is worth. And that's it. That's all they do. And now they're getting engaged slightly more in your area. They did open up their FEMA camps, and they are helping to identify bodies. So that is one thing that they are doing. But typical, they're otherwise obstructing actual aid effort, and they are threatening our people, even though that is against both the international and national law in North Carolina, as we proved in court the other day. So, yesterday.
So that's what the Federation does, friends. This is what the Federation does, because we have a lot of North Carolinians, even on the Assembly, who have no comprehension of the great work that you're doing. And it's just unfortunate because we there's those of us who can know what it is, and then there's those of us who don't want to see it because they think that, well, it's only the people who are doing the recovery and only the people that are doing, anything. And I'm like, that's right, because we are the government. We are the government.
Right.
And so of course it's us doing that.
Right. And those are our civilian helicopters that are flying. It's our donations that are feeding the gasoline in those helicopters. It's people who are joining together to help people, because the persons don't give a rat's rump. The persons are just acting as officers who are not engaged in a rescue effort.
Right.
What they're doing is a command and control effort, trying to ride herd on us, and they're not even stopping the looting. They're not stopping the looting. They're not providing any kind of, psychological or, any kind of health care. They're not providing counseling to the victims of the flood. They're not doing anything to prevent suicide. They are just absolutely useless.
100%. We're working on a newsletter right now, Anna. We're collecting information, and it'll start going out in the next day. So we'll start having a newsletter that's going out that will be providing North Carolinians or anybody who we have emails for, with information. And hopefully our assembly members will be able to help us get the word out to all of the people that they know and beyond. The folks are not comprehending that the corporatocracy owns all the media. It's the corporatocracy.
Right.
And the fact that the Federation, that you, Anna, were able to put them in their place and remind them they work for us and push them to say, hey, you've been paid. We expect you to do this, that, the other. Hello. That is, friends, that's what it looks like when the Federation comes in.
Well, and that's the way it needs to be. It needs to be us protecting the people to the, uttermost extent that we possibly can. At the last report, the operations there in North Carolina and throughout the disaster area are gradually shifting from what we call rescue and recovery to, or rather, rescue to recovery. And in this case, it's kind of a half and half mixed bag. About half of the people that were flying out are alive. Many of them require triage and then more medical care for various things, mostly exposure and infected wounds that were suffered during the disaster. And about half of those that were flying out are dead. So it's going gradually, as it always does, from a parameter of most of the activity being rescues of living people to recovery of dead bodies. And we give thanks that we were able to save as many people and make as many supply drops as we've been able to. It's been a very intense effort, and it's been hampered and obstructed at every step by the federal government interfering in ways which are totally inappropriate and not helpful. And now, as we're shifting gears somewhat, the race is on to provide help and direction to people on the ground. Now, we've got, having looked at the overall situation, especially in the high country, in the mountains, we're trying to find out if there are people who have other options than sitting it out in the mountains for the winter. If they have friends, relatives that they can go to in other states and ride out the winter somewhere else, well, then we're trying to get them the travel and other things they need to get somewhere else for now.
Yeah, for evacuation, we want to try to help too, Anna. So we created a North Carolina Assembly link tree. And on the link tree, there are people who are willing to donate cash, supplies, labor, which would include, like maybe there's a family that needs flights to go to their family wherever they might be. And if we're able to let folks know, hey, we need money to be able to help this family get home, so that they can evacuate, until the spring, so they can come back and build, or anything like that. Maybe someone just needs a ride. Maybe someone needs to get on a train. Maybe they need to get from the area at the mountains, to the train station. Maybe they just need to get to whatever. We have links active on this link tree for anyone who wants to just communicate. There's a communication button, friends. You can push the communication button to tell us what you need. There is one if you want to donate labor. So maybe if you can offer a ride or whatever, then you can put that on there. If you want to offer supplies, there's one for you to donate supplies. If there's one for cash, go ahead, Dan.
Thank you guys for having me here. Thank you, Anna, for everything you do. I just wanted on the supply case, on that note, we are personally taking them here on the East Coast at my warehouse. It is 225 Crow Atan Road, Crowatan Road, Castle Hayne, North Carolina, 28429. But it needs to be by appointment only. So please call, text, or reach me by email ahead of time so we make sure somebody's here to receive it. Thank you very much.
So that's Dan, and he's on the link, y'all. So when you click on the link, then it'll take you to him. You don't have to try to figure out that address, but Dan, they'll just be reaching out to you directly, okay? And so anyway, we are organized to be able to help with that kind of thing. We know that the Federation has been incredibly gracious in doing all the heavy lifting in terms of the choppers and, that sort of thing. Becky, did you have something? Oh, sorry.
Well, yeah, and I mean, some of these places are still, you can't reach them except by helicopter.
Absolutely.
So some of these places are still out there and will be, continue to be somewhat inaccessible for the rest of the year. I mean, it's going to take months, if not years, to rebuild some of these roads and bridge systems that were destroyed in this disaster. So we're trying to coordinate, we're trying to get people out, we're trying to encourage people to go to, stay with friends and relatives for the winter so that they're not in danger of exposure or at the end of a very long supply line. We're encouraging families around the country that have space. It doesn't have to be anything too fancy, but if they've got an extra motor home that they're not using for the winter, or they have a mother-in-law apartment, these people need shelter. And so it doesn't need to be something fancy. It just needs to be a livable, warm, dry space where they can live for the winter. So if you want to foster a family from the disaster area, by all means, we try to match up the need with the situation. So if you've got a dry bunkhouse, someplace where people can get by. Most of the people in the hill country there in North Carolina are not real fancy folk. They have lived back up in those hills for a long time. They know how to live with the land. They know how to survive in their environment. But this winter, with their homes destroyed and much of the infrastructure that they need to get by destroyed, they need a foster family in some other location to help them get through this. We're really concerned that, it's already dipping below the freezing level in the hill country of North Carolina and throughout the Appalachian chain there. So it's getting down into freezing temperatures, and we're seeing exposure deaths from people that are just not able to get shelter in a timely fashion.
Go ahead, Dan.
Again, thank you for laying down the law of the land, Anna, and Federation. As we are all connected, I'd like to stress how important all these things are actually connected to. We would also encourage anybody that's a part of the assembly. There's two things we would hope that you guys would consider doing. One is being a part of the militia. Without the militia, we can't stand. And two is being a juror. We did have the opportunity to notice our sheriffs, but without a jury, the sheriff has no power either. So we need to stand behind him. I yield.
All
Yeah,
of that is true.
can you speak to that, Anna? Yeah.
Well, and it's been an urgent issue set before the assemblies for a long time that they need to get their own courts up and standing, but people have been buffaloed by this thought that it's so complex. But our law is not complex. You know, the other people, the British Tories and the municipal government folk, they have a very complex system of law. And, you know, they have 80 million statutes that they have, you know, put on their backs. We don't have that. Our law is very simple and very intuitive, and it's easy to convene a court of our peers because what? We're living people, and we don't have all of that statutory law and code to interpret.
Right.
You know?
But
So
we have the truth, Anna, and a lot of people don't know how to talk to each other. This is the problem. The problem is that for our law, which is swift, we're not a slow bureaucracy. We don't think about things and, ponder and give everybody an opportunity to figure out this whole language barrier because it's not complicated. We just speak plain English. So,
yes.
they just need to know that they have to be able to, if you're going to be a jury, then you should talk to the people involved in the situation because you need to know what the truth is.
Right. And it's very straightforward. English is our official language. We don't speak legalese. We don't speak in code. And, the issues are very simple and straightforward. It's, think of all the John Wayne Westerns you've ever seen. We're that law of the West, we have our posses, we have our deputies, and we have our citizen groups, and we deal with citizens. We deal with them as a separate population, and we deal with us, the people, as people. So it's pretty straightforward. One of the things that's coming forward in the international discussion are all of the attempts that our erstwhile employees and the principals that have been misdirecting them have made, is that this has been going on so long that it's institutionalized. Well, I'm sorry, just because you institutionalize a crime doesn't mean it's right? And so we're having this grand discussion at the international level, decrying what's gone on here in this country and the effect that it's having on everyone, not just the people in the disaster area, but everyone. And so, this disaster is kind of pushing people in the states that have been affected to get their act together and actually form up their militias and their courts in support of their assembly and in support of their sheriffs. Now, what's happened is when you declare the law of the land and you put out the kinds of notices that we are, then what's happening is that these people who have been occupying vacated offices are suddenly forced to enter into their peacekeeping office. Okay? So these judges who had it at their discretion whether they were going to act as Brits or as Americans are suddenly being pushed into their American office. These sheriffs who have been operating as employees of a foreign corporation are suddenly being pushed into their peacekeeping office. And, that's a very different position to operate from than what they're used to. But I think that the overall response that we've gotten nationwide is, well, thank God somebody made a decision. You know, we now understand our office. We now understand the power of our office and what we can do. And so that part is going well. Our efforts to begin the process of evacuating people out of the area, but not severing their tie to their land. This is another important part. We want to reach as many of the people that we can so that, you know, if they decide to go live with relatives in New York over the winter, or they decide to go live with relatives in California or wherever, that they are still in the loop and they're still getting information about their home locations. You know, they are kept up to date when the roads reopen and when the bridges are rebuilt, and they're, you know, able to come back and are not forced to sell out their interest
Right.
out of pure desperation or because they were not available to those who are trying to serve them notices about things going on in their area.
Becky, Becky has questions for you, Anna, about this.
Yeah, I'm sure.
My question is how to handle eminent domain if it was to come to their door.
There is no right of federal eminent domain. They got away with it when they pushed through the Federal Highway Act when they did the interstate system back in the 70s. And they think that that gives them precedent to exercise it again. But they got away with it back in the 70s because our states were not organized and couldn't lift their hand and say anything to prevent it. Now it's a different story. The state assemblies are in session and they can most certainly object to any claim of federal eminent domain, because the fact is, if they don't have a piece of paper signed by a valid state legislature prior to 1860 granting them a specific parcel, then they have no right to even be in your state.
So, can we do that on behalf of anyone that we're trying to protect, because we are the lawful government here, Anna, because we're supposed to protect the people and the assets. So, Becky's one of the communication coordinators. And so, if we know that ABC person is in California with their family because they had to evacuate, then
Right.
on their behalf, are we as the assembly able to notice in their defense, because they might not be declared Americans, but we are?
Oh yeah, we can definitely serve notice to any corporation or any federal government department or agency that's trying to claim eminent domain.
Okay. Becky, everybody, you guys hear that?
And you know, it all goes back to the same sorts of laws and charters that established the state in the very first place. That we do have that right to protect the interests of living people and of the environment, the actual land and soil. So most definitely. Now, in order to exercise their own right, we're going to have to maintain contact with these people so that they can stand up and say, you know, no, I want to keep my interest in the property and in the mineral rights. There in North Carolina, you get your mineral rights along with your land. So part of the
100%.
problem for them, for those who are trying to claim eminent domain, is that you do have mineral rights that were grandfathered in and part of your homestead tradition there in North Carolina. So they do have to buy the mineral rights, and they do have to deal with you as the owner of the soil.
Perfect. Becky, you had something still?
No, thank you, Anna.
Dan?
Yeah, thank you. We've had a few choice words since the beginning of the podcast. One, you opened up with speaking on no one knowing. Anna said, in her statement, in the loop, and you have said declared Americans. And I would just like to just stress the fact that 9 out of 10 people that we found that we've talked to have not sent their notices. If you don't send your notices to the state, you are not actually declared. And I would like to encourage everybody to protect themselves so then we could better help protect them. I yield.
Right. Well, most of us have been unaware of the lies told about us and the actions taken against us. So, we're living our lives. Of course, we think we're Americans, right? What else would we be? Nobody told us that we'd been registered as British territorial citizens, right?
Right.
So, if you don't know something, you can't object to it, can you? And this was all part and parcel of their intent, that they were going to sneak in the back door and redefine us, relabel us, change our political status, and subject us to their king without us even knowing it. And so, the need to stand up and reclaim your status as an American and to deny their false registration is key to being able to exercise your natural and unalienable rights. It's key to being able to enforce the constitutions, the federal constitutions, and their guarantees. It's the absolute bedrock of having protection from a lawless government and lawless government subcontractors.
Anna, we found and any of you guys like Becky or Antonio or Dan, if you want to let her know, we found when Dan's saying 9 out of 10 people, what he's talking about is 9 out of 10 people on our assembly currently, Anna.
They haven't actually done their declarations.
They haven't actually noticed.
And they haven't served notice.
So they might have done even a whole 928 package, but they've not actually done the notice.
Well,
There's been a lot of lack of direction for sure. I yield.
Well, you do have to serve notice on the State Department, U.S. State Department. They're supposed to get the word out to all of their departments and agencies, but you do have to serve notice on the U.S. State Department of your political status.
How does that affect their global family group account? So this is the situation, Anna. We're learning. Antonio, you go after you speak out about it. But I just wanted you to know, Anna, that me, Dan, Antonio, Becky, we're finding that people on our assembly currently have never noticed the state of state. They have a global family group account. They, have done their package. They think that they are declared, but they've not declared to anyone. Antonio?
Well,
because go ahead.
Well,
Yeah, but I was just saying, based off if not noticing the state of states, like you not coming out of their system the way that we should. We're on the LRO in our system, but I feel like once we set our notices in play, that the Secretary of State will do their job as far as noticing their people that work under them. So that's very important for us, because once we put everybody on notice, we're able to stand who we are as American state nationals, and that's who we are, the living men and women. So once us as a state, as living men and women, once we do that, it puts them on notice, and we're able to stand on what we know, and that's standing on the land and the soil.
Right. We don't want to give them the opportunity to lie and say that they don't know what we're talking about and they didn't receive notice and blah, blah, blah. We want to have it in our hands saying, oh, yes, we did. And, here we published it. Okay. And, we recorded it. And now we've sent you a notice and we've told you that we are claiming our birthright political status as American state nationals. And guess what? Here we are. Now, they, on the other hand, have failed on many occasions to actually take the proper action to notify their departments. And when they do that, then we bring out our notification letter, our notices, say, oh, well, right here, back in 06, I noticed this, entire chain of command, and it should be on your records. In some defense of them, they have been changing the name and the operating field of their corporations as they've gone through bankruptcy after bankruptcy after bankruptcy, and they keep offloading their debt onto the public. So, one of the arguments that I encounter in international circles is, oh, but, you noticed the USA Incorporated, you didn't notice the U.S.A. Incorporated, and you didn't notice the United States of America Incorporated, you noticed the United States of America Incorporated. And they play all these names and all these different identities that are very similar, but it's always the same principles. It's always the British King, it's always the Lord Mayor of London, and it's always the Pope that are at the end of the line. And so what we did is we noticed the principles as well as the corporations as we went. So they don't have a leg to stand on in international court because we've been addressing the principles all along. And it doesn't matter what names the principles are operating under as long as the principles are being noticed. So
Exactly.
we've done our homework, we've done it in spades, and there's just no getting around what we've done. And
Well, we're going to be working with the assembly to go through and try to identify those people and help them get their notices done properly. Anna, there's obviously a great confusion. And, that means that all the other issues that we've had on our assembly, I mean, first of all, what we're finding is that's a situation happening on multiple assemblies across the country. It's not something unique to North Carolina. And we've chosen to make everything that we're facing public, Anna, in an effort to help you demonstrate for the rest of the states. We're hoping that you'll use us as a demonstration. We're here for you to use us as a demonstration and a teaching tool for others to follow, because we do want to be able to, all do a good job. And we're sure all the assemblies across the country, they want to do a good job and get their courts up. Everybody wants to win. No one's intentionally joining up and trying to, maybe someone's infiltrating and creating a problem, but I find that most of the time that isn't really the case. Now, they might accidentally be behaving like that because their corporate mind just takes over. We've obviously seen that repeatedly, where everybody just goes back to that same linear structure because they can't figure the circles out. Because the circles are a little bit chaotic. They're definitely terrifying, especially because we are saying self-governing means we're saying I'm the government, and we have to stand up to somebody and say that. Go ahead, Antonia.
And I also like to add to that because you got to look at, we're coming from a system of being controlled our entire life. So when you're coming from a corporation and you're coming to be self-governed, it's kind of hard to make that transition because you have to unlearn to relearn, understand the laws of the land versus the corporate, which is the water jurisdiction. So when you coming from there and you coming from a corporation of being a CEO of a company, then you come in to be a volunteer of an assembly, sometimes that ego will come in as a CEO and it kind of like, you don't be meaning to, but sometimes they're a clash. So me personally, coming back on the land, I had to unlearn to relearn and basically understand who I am as self-governed and lead, not as leading the people, but just step up as a living person to show people that, okay, well, this is what we have to do with self-govern. So if I get a citation from de facto, I know that I have to send paperwork into their system, let them know who I am and where I stand, versus trying to argue and go back and forth with them because the power is in our hand, which is our signature. And once you put it all on paper to notify them, then everything should happen. So I always advise people, do not argue with them. Just tell them who you are, be calm, send your paperwork accordingly, and you'll get a respond back, and they'll pretty much leave you alone once your paperwork is done right. So I always tell people we have to unlearn to relearn, and once you unlearn to relearn, you will know how to pretty much operate as a living man and woman.
Well, it's sort of like the disaster. Everybody forgets about the demolition and cleanup phase, which you're now facing. Before you can rebuild, you have to clean up the mess. And that's a major league amount of work. And you don't have the tools and you don't have the manpower and the organization to do it, ever. I don't care what kind of a disaster it is. And in some ways, a flood is worse than a fire. Because with a fire, at least it's poof, and all you're dealing with is foundation. With a flood, you've got all of that timber, and all the things are still there. And so you wind up, basically burning big scrap piles and digging holes and burying stuff. And, it's just it's a major league cleanup effort to get things cleared away so that you can rebuild. And that's one of the big problems we're facing in the hill country, is where, their house is partially demolished and they have to clear away the, what's left, right, in order to have the space cleared to rebuild. And then there's all sorts of decisions about, are we going to rebuild on the same spot, or are we going to move it to higher up the bank, or what?
Well, the topography is completely different, Anna, after the storm. And, honestly, if people are able to evacuate, which I'm sure they don't want to do because no one's ever been around to be able to protect their assets, and we are here now. But, and if they let us know, then we certainly are interested and would be willing and to stand up for them, so that they can move out of harm's way. But also because the topography is going to remediate, and allowing it to reset for a few months would be really beneficial to know how it's going to, heal up. The land also needs to be able to recover from this assault. It's been harmed and damaged, and it just needs a minute to be able, because any infrastructure work that they do before they allow it to kind of settle is going to be unstable if they don't give it an opportunity. There's going to be a lot more planning that's required, and some of that won't be able to be done until they are able to clear the areas out. And I don't know that we can do that fast enough to race against the weather. And, so camping is not really encouraged unless you are, really trained with this cold climate and knowing how to tolerate it.
Right. Well, North Carolina isn't a particularly cold climate, but it does get snow, especially in the mountains, and it does go below freezing. And a person can easily suffer exposure or die from exposure if they're in those kind of wet, damp, cold conditions. So, that's the race that we're in, is to provide that immediate shelter for the winter so that people can survive long enough to get to the rest of it, which will be taking place over the next year, 2 years of just cleaning up the mess.
Yeah.
And then, you're starting after that into the rebuilding phase of it. And so people will be struggling to rebuild even as they're tearing down, of course. But it would be, it's too close. This happened in the fall, and it's too close to the winter for, doing an actual building program and taking care of the demolition of the old buildings and doing all of that stuff before snow hits. It's not possible.
So, was that planned, Anna?
It could have been. This is a traditional hurricane season. They come in the spring and in the fall. but this was certainly not a traditional or normal storm by any stretch of the imagination. And, it just hit at the wrong time of the year to make recovery easier, in some areas even possible.
Mhm.
So we've been in contact with some philanthropists that are willing to assist. We've got some leads on housing developers that actually build cabins. They build small cabins, like
Wow.
16 by 20 prefabs that they can
Mhm.
load up on a rail car, and that you can just pick up with a big enough helicopter and go. But you still have
Perfect.
to have the site prepared. You have to have some timbers, some treated timbers laid down, or some rock wall foundations set up so that they can drop it down onto the foundation. And so we're looking into all sorts of opportunities, that any kind of option we can find, including 3D printing.
Mm.
They have there's a company in Texas that 3D prints entire houses out of basically ABS plastic, which is incredibly dense and strong, and it's immune to weather and immune to insect damage and all of that. It's actually pretty nice stuff, uh, and it doesn't give off fumes. You might think that it had potential to be harmful because it's a plastic, but it turns out it's extremely stable. And they've been 3D printing entire buildings by making like foundation blocks. And these things go together incredibly fast, so that if you had the materials airlifted in and then you dropped a crew of 4 or 5 guys, they could have an entire house built in a couple of days. So there are some things like that are kind of space agey, but nonetheless, if the need is to provide shelter, they're very reasonable cost alternative. So just building these small 16 by 20 prefabs and dropping them in would give people what they need to get through the winter.
Sure.
After the fire here, I lived in a 16 by 20 for the winter. And, it wasn't particularly easy and it wasn't particularly fun, but obviously I'm still here. And so, but trying to get the septic situation sorted out is another big deal. We forget about it, but sanitation is a huge issue after a disaster like this. And, so many septic systems have been disrupted, and the drain fields have been destroyed, and all sorts of havoc results as a result, because suddenly you don't have any place to go to the bathroom. You don't have a place to drain away the dishwater or anything. It's, so, getting big, prefab 1,000-gallon plastic sewer septic tanks, and getting those installed, and getting the drain field prepared for them. It's a lot of work, that you don't think about, but it has to be done.
Anna, is it okay for us to start popping up a few questions here?
Sure.
All right. So Betty's saying, since Prince Philip received $900 trillion, doesn't King Charles have enough money to bankroll? I would say America, not the U.S.A, because we don't really want to bankroll them for a few
Well,
years.
the thing here is that Prince Philip received this $950 trillion in life force value annuities 3 days before he retired from public life. So he received it as a public official, right? And then he retired into private life. Okay? So it's sort of like he did the dirty deed and acted as the pass-through, and then he stepped away and said, okay, well, I'm now a private individual. I can't be sued. I can't be blamed. I'm claiming my immunity from any accusation of wrongdoing. And where did the $950 trillion in life force value annuities go? And what exactly is it for? Well, it's an insurance annuity. Okay, so everybody's got the open question of where did this go? And who are the insured? Well, I think it's pretty obvious that at least part of the insured were the people of Canada. And it may have been a great deal more. But all of that is still being researched and determined as to, number one, where the money came from, and number two, where it went. But yes, that's a huge amount of money capable of keeping a lot of things going for a long time, if the Brits can be strong-armed to cough it up or give a accounting for it.
This question kind of went along with that, Anna. Like, what's stopping the British Crown from extending yet again another 90 days? And we already know that they're funded.
Well, they could extend another 30 days or another 90 days. However, the members who did so are under investigation because it is a treasonous act that leads to the kind of wrongdoing that we've seen here. We've had those agencies have caused the problem, and they were only able to cause the problem because the British Territorial Congress funded them. If they had sunsetted on October 1st and everybody involved in those agencies had gone home, oh, the pink slip's here, there's no more funds. If they had all just gone home, we wouldn't have had a hurricane, we wouldn't have had all this damage, we wouldn't have FEMA tromping around causing problems. All those people would be out of work and they'd be back home doing whatever else they were going to do. And we wouldn't have these problems if it not for them. And so we're blaming the U.S. Territorial Congress for funding them.
So this person says, is that the reason why the Prosperity Bank did not open last week? Because the Joint Chiefs voted to extend funding for another 3 months? And what if they just keep doing that? I mean, you kind of just said that part, but...
No, that's not the reason that the Prosperity unions, these are different. Prosperity unions are different than the bank. Okay. Prosperity unions are like credit unions in reverse. The typical credit union offers you a loan and then you pay them back plus interest, right? A prosperity union, its fundamental function is to issue prepaid credit that you are already owed. So the prosperity unions are a separate institution such as you've never seen. They've never existed before. And we got all 50 of them set up in terms of having the computer systems and stuff in place to open them for each state. And we're just going to open the doors, and whoever walks through the doors, we're going to offer them information. We're going to tell them about what we're doing and why it's different and how this works. And those who are eligible can then sign up and, take part in the prosperity end of it. And those who are, say, working for the federal government and therefore can't immediately step into that American shoe can get a loan on their own credit based on their own eligibility, that they don't have to pay back with usury. See, we're not going to pay any usury for loans that don't really exist. If somebody's owed a big lump of money and they just can't access it right now for some, bureaucratic reason, they should still be able to, get a loan of that money from their account and not have to pay any interest on it. So there will be advantages to people using our facilities, whether they're federal government employees or whether they're eligible to act as Americans straight out of the box.
This is another continuation of a great part of the question then. So the standing order not to obstruct and assist apply to these financial institutions entrusted to issue or extend credit and provide goods and services to us, to consumers.
Well, certainly it does in the disaster area, because we are basically demanding that they assist. Under the law, they are supposed to immediately drop whatever they're doing and assist to the extent humanly possible. They're not supposed to be confiscating supplies. They're not supposed to be interfering in convoys. They're not supposed to be slashing tires or arresting people or making false claims. They're supposed to be assisting. And so we've been nudging FEMA and the county governments and everybody to assist, to make it clear that it's their duty to assist as public employees. But the financial institutions, it isn't so much that they're obligated to assist in that kind of direct way, but they are certainly obligated to provide good faith service. And that's what they haven't been doing.
Can you tell people about the currency problem? I don't know exactly which aspect of this person wants you to get into, because there's a lot of things you could say about
there are
that.
a lot of issues about the currency. The fiat money is basically a promissory note, but it is a promissory note that isn't actually signed by any living person, and it doesn't have a end date. So it's not a negotiable instrument. And as such, it's just like monopoly money. It doesn't have any value in and of itself. In fact, we've got plenty of court cases that show that if you were to steal a whole suitcase full of Federal Reserve notes, you couldn't be charged with theft because they have no value.
Right. Last night, oh, sorry.
So that's a big problem when you're basically dealing in IOUs. Now, they are proposing that we issue more IOUs and just change from Federal Reserve notes to United States notes. And we said, no, we're not going to pay the freight on that. We're not going to pay the bogus interest on that. So we will claim all of those United States notes upon issuance and convert them into credit notes and use the prepaid credit on our side of the ledger to basically extinguish the IOU factor and extinguish any usury on the payment.
And so continuing all of these financial questions, then, you mentioned last night that the stock market stopped in August. Will it still crash even though it's not functioning? Like, is there a crash besides the crash that it's not even on?
Yeah, well, that's the crazy part of it. All this is staged. It's all like Hollywood. And, they say everyone's 401k is in there, but what's really in there is a notation of credit that you're owed, right? It's just digits. And so what they've been doing is they've created this appearance of a market, and they have created these money market instruments that are invalid too. And then they've invested in all these different things, and they've just played this gigantic game with everybody. If you have a 401k, what we've long advocated is that you take advantage of the 401k gold option, and instead put your money, your 401k, into a gold-based program, because we know that the Federal Reserve notes are valueless, literally valueless. We know that these IOUs are being called in and that they're evidence of fraud against us. Okay, we know this. And so the banks that issued these Federal Reserve notes in bad faith are trying to collect all those Federal Reserve notes to destroy the evidence as much as possible, because then they will, be socked for the difference. They'll have to come up with a reasonable way of settling the debt, or they will be bankrupted, and they want to avoid bankruptcy. So all this stuff is going on all at once, and we're just trying our best to make it work out for people so that your life savings is not dissolved because of legal chicanery. And the 401k being transferred into a gold account, you actually have something physical in your hand, which has to be better than having worthless paper in your hand or a certificate for a stock that is non-existent. So, beat feet and get your 401k out of the stock market and into something physical.
Does Anna need access to the fiduciary account for the Prosperity Bank to go live? What will happen to the lien against the bar in the event the JCS never give Anna access to her account?
Oh, nobody has to give me access to my fiduciary account. I already have a fiduciary account. That's what we've been depositing these bonds and things that we've recouped into. Now, the Prosperity Bank is on the other side of the ledger. You got two kinds of things that you're dealing with. You got money that's an actual, factual, physical asset, right? Gold, silver, land, cash in hand. These are physical assets, right? And then you have credit. You have promissory notes, Federal Reserve notes, bonds, stocks. Those are all commercial paper, and they're on a different ledger. They're a different kind of commodity, different kind of financial product entirely. And so the prosperity unions, they're not banks. They're something that's never existed before in the history of the world, and we call them prosperity unions, are based on the actual credit, prepaid credit that you're owed because you've been paying things that you didn't owe your entire life, and your parents paid things they didn't owe their entire lives. And it goes all the way back to your great-great-grandparents. This is 6 generations of Americans who paid bills they didn't owe. And, the rats are trying to say that, oh, well, it's long since all that stuff happened, This happened back in, 1898. You can't charge for that. Oh, yes, we can, because fraud was involved in all of it. We can go all the way back.
Mm-hmm.
So, this is some huge arguments are being had internationally, diplomatically, and in discussion groups. And but our point is that, that fraud was involved from the very beginning. So, we'll charge it all the way back.
That's right. And so they're asking, will the military pay be affected by the new charges, Anna?
Well, now that the military is the military and not a mercenary organization anymore, they will get pay raises and benefit raises, and they'll finally get the actual medical care that they're owed. And they'll no longer be lab rats. They'll no longer be subject to every kind of mandate that they take different kinds of crap. They will not have to do that anymore. So there
Praise the
are
Lord.
some good things happening as a result of all this. And it's offensive to us that they haven't had any kind of pay raise since 1964.
Absolutely. These are our sons and daughters, friends. So on Connecticut, they're saying, Anna, they have no sheriffs. So who would they deliver their notice to?
Elect your own assembly sheriff for your counties, and then you'll have a sheriff.
All right. Does the Constitution allow the federal government to have C jurisdiction sheriffs on our state?
Well, that is a really good question. And the answer is that they were allowed to have Pinkertons come in here, and they were allowed to hire these foreign, they're called security services personnel. When the railroads were being robbed by characters like Jesse James, they wanted to hire these personal services, security services, to come in and ride the rails. And so there had to be a law actually passed in Congress allowing, it's called the Pinkerton laws, that allow these foreign security personnel to come in and work for the corporations. And so, yes, they do have the ability to bring in C jurisdiction corporate entities to serve in these capacities, but they are supposed to only operate within verifiable federal enclaves and post roads and sea lanes, like the U.S. Marshals. So they can do it, but they're supposed to limit their activity to federal enclaves. Now, we do have corporate sheriffs. We have sheriffs of the county of Macon as opposed to Macon County, all right? Each sheriff is actually occupying two different offices. He's working as a law enforcement officer when he's working for the county of, and he's working as a peacekeeping officer when he works for the county. Now, what we just did was forcing those sheriffs to enter their peacekeeping offices. So, if they're operating under the law of the land, then they're in their peacekeeping office. And by declaring the law of the land, we've just kind of picked them up and gone, okay, well, it's no longer discretionary on your part whether you're going to work on land or on sea or, enforce sea law for the corporation that you're getting a paycheck from. You're now under land law, and you need to enter into your peacekeeping office and enforce the law of the land.
All right. And this is the last question, Anna. Could you please write a letter to the state and county courts like you did the sheriffs? We are trying to protect the people in Arkansas, but Cheryl has been hauled off to dock and is on lockdown. Oh.
DOC, Department of Corrections. Is that the right? Is that, I think?
Yeah, it'd have to be, right? That's what I was reading it as.
Well, Arkansas is a special problem. Arkansas has always been just outrageously corrupt. If you recall, Arkansas was the state where they had actual kickback books that the county clerks were keeping to show how much kickback money the different officials got. So Arkansas is a real tough nut to crack, but we are working on it. And it's not just Cheryl. A lot of people in Arkansas have been subjected to these basically criminal crony networks. And, they were cleaned out in the 1980s by the FBI. It's looking like we're going to have to go in there again and do a major clean out.
Keith is saying thank you, Anna, for all you do for us. If there's any other updates in accessing the global accounts, I feel you have a lot that you're having to combat.
Yeah, well, we are. There are those that are very readily granting access to accounts and bonds and things all around the world. There are people and even governments that are trying to, assist us because they realize what we've gone through here.
Mm-hmm.
And so we have sympathy. It's no longer Hate the Americans Day internationally because they now realize that, hey, it wasn't the Americans, it was the U.S. corporation. They're making that distinction. And as a result, we're getting a lot more help and a lot more, assistance of all kinds. And one of the ways is that we're getting support for accessing different global accounts that actually belong to us. So there is that. But remember that even with that, there's a multi-step process that we have to go through in terms of receiving these sorts of funds because they have to be audited. They have to be properly accounted for. Then once you get them into the bank, then you have to figure out a distribution system. You have to determine eligibility requirements. All those sorts of things have to be established. And so, yes, we are getting access to some of our global accounts. Some are coming quicker than others. And we're not going to wait for some far off day. We're rushing things through as quickly as we reasonably can so that people get relief that they're owed right now. And so we are gaining more recoupment and we are gaining more restitution every day. But that doesn't mean that we've hit the payload of what we are really owed yet. There's a lot more that needs to be recouped, and there's a lot more restitution that needs to be paid out of the credit ledger.
Thank you, Anna. We appreciate you, and we appreciate everything that you're doing for us, and we're trying to do a good job too. So
I know you are. I can see by your bright and smiling faces that you've all been thinking deep thoughts. You've all been dealing and struggling with difficult problems. But, the primary thing to keep your face always focused on is protect the people and their assets. Job one, take care of the people. Job two, take care of their assets. And beyond that, there's no reason to have a government.
Go ahead, Antonio.
Yes, and I want to share with my state to let them know that we went through this storm and that the sun will shine again. And through all this, we will all come together and we will stand our assembly and we will all be one. And I want to encourage everybody that's going through it that we here, we love y'all, and we're looking to get our state back. Because without none of us, this state will be possible because we're from all different backgrounds. So I encourage everybody on North Carolina to hang in there because we're coming back.
Well, and God bless all the people from all over the country who are opening their hands and their hearts and who are doing what they can to help. There are so many good people, especially in the small business community, who are doing everything they possibly can. So let's be grateful for them and all of the love and the outpouring of concern that's coming from every state of the union.
All right, friends, we will see you back here on Tuesday next week. Thank you so much.